I think what has happened with President Rajuel and the Madagascar people is something that has to be commended. I personally have gone out and said that that is something that ought to be appreciated and supported. What the people of Madagascar are saying that we have discovered something that we hold the view is capable of dealing with COVID-19. The World Health Organization is asking, does it conform to the protocol that have been prescribed by the World Health Organization? But let us ask ourselves, who prescribes these protocols? It is Pfizer, which is a pharmaceutical company. It is Novartis, which is a pharmaceutical company. It is Johnson & Johnson, which is a pharmaceutical company. It is Roche, which is a pharmaceutical company. Why is it that when an African country discovers something, we don't scrutinize and we don't ask the question as to whether it can be potent? If indeed the Madagascans have discovered something, what we need to do is to ask ourselves, if they have made baby steps, what can we do by dint of research in our universities and other research institutions to ensure that that particular concoction achieves the levels which are acceptable? And I'm very happy with the people of Equatorial Guinea and the people of Guinea-Bissau and now Tanzania, who have come out and said we are going to try it. Because in any event, all these drugs that we consume so very gleefully from the West, the material, the raw material that is used as extracts are actually from Africa, among other places. So it is quite possible, and I have no doubt in my mind that what is being peddled by the people of Madagascar deserves scrutiny. To dismiss it offhand as we are doing is one of the things that we Africans like to do, to embrace with our folded hands that which comes from the West, India, and other parts of the world, and to deride and to dismiss that which is from the continent of Africa. I'm also very happy with the Oni of Ife in Nigeria, who has also recommended that we ought to look into herbal medicine. And in this regard, even the government of Zimbabwe has gone out and said that that is one of the things that we ought to do. And is also not lost, or the cabinet secretary for health in Kenya has also encouraged our premier institution in medical research to work with herbalists towards finding herbal medicine for COVID-19. The beauty of this is that what is happening now is very beautiful. The good men and women across Africa are in conversation. Malema and I and Chamisa and others are in conversation. So that tells you that there is a confluence of ideas, and the beauty now with COVID, if there is any silver lining with COVID, is the realization by Africans within the continent and outside of the continent that we must now begin to work together. And I know for a fact that there are many organizations that are now moving in the direct. State 55 is one such organization, Esgadia, ADDI, Obarikana Chihombori Kwao, who is a Zimbabwean, as you know, working with the diaspora. So the beauty now is that people are moving away from rhetoric, and people are beginning to do things on the ground. Those things may not be visible now, but I believe that by the end of the year, many Africans will see the footprint of all these efforts, and that will be the beginning. It is not for the faint-hearted. Just this morning, somebody made a comment in a forum where I was saying, if Africa cannot unite Somalia, how can it unite itself? And this was my answer. If the United States of America could grow from the 13 original states to 50 states and other territories, why shouldn't Africa unite? I believe it can be done. It is not going to be easy. And in fact, I dare say that the people who are going to stand in the way of African unity are active professional politicians. Because a politician who is a cabinet minister in a country A fears that when we have a bigger Africa, then there will be a small fish in a small pond and they will not survive. Those who are simply looking for positions will find that a bigger Africa is not a very comfortable thing. But I have no doubt in my mind that going forward, our strength will lie in our unity. It is not going to be easy. It may not happen in our lifetime, but if indeed it does, it's something that we ought to do. And you know, if you want to know that a good idea never dies, look at African unity. It started, the United States of Africa the idea started in 1897. The first meeting about it was in 1900. We have had 8 meetings about it. The chief high priest of it was Kwame Nkrumah. When he was overthrown in 1960 and all his books were banned in Ghana, who would have known that Nkrumah would make sense again today? Today, when we talk about African unity, you see how fresh Nkrumah's ideas are. See how fresh Mwalimu Kambarage Nyerere's ideas are. See how fresh the ideas of Patrice Emery Lumumba are. And it's only 60 years since African countries regained their independence. If it takes another 100 years, why should we worry? Our role is to play our part. Africa will know unity. But we are not being naive in assuming that it will come easily. If it comes easily, well and good. But we must work at it. And voices such as mine, such as yours, such as Chamisa's, such as my good friend Julius Malema's, such as Cyril Ramaphosa's, such as many others. These are voices, Arikana Chihombori, and many others. These are voices that are simply contributing to an effort that is already on the ground. COVID-19 has changed the world in a very dramatic way. Dramatic in the sense that we now find ourselves, wherever one is, in some kind of lockdown, whether the lockdown is of the drastic kind, as we saw in Wuhan, or the drastic kind as it was in Uganda and Rwanda, or the much more relaxed and targeted kind as we've seen in Kenya, or the relaxed one as we see in Burundi and Tanzania and Sweden and Taiwan. I think there is a sense in which the world has been embroiled in a situation which was completely unprecedented. I remember as a young person reading Albert Einstein, the fabled scientist, and he said that the world, I do not know what weapons will be used to fight the Third World War, but it will not be missiles and atomic bombs. It would appear that it's viruses that will constitute the Third World War. Africa is a continent, as one would say, that has promise. But Africa is a continent that underperforms, is a continent that punches below her weight. Whether you think of her from a political standpoint, you think of her from an economic standpoint, you think of her from a cultural dimension, you think of her from a technological dimension, you think of her from a sporting dimension, there is a sense in which we never quite realize our potential. And of course, when we find ourselves in a situation such as this, we have no shortage of excuses and reasons that we can ascribe to our plight. But I think there is a sense in which we ourselves, as the indigents of Africa, are also co-authors of our own misfortune. Whether we can say that is the 400 years of slavery or the nearly 100 years of colonization and the succeeding nearly 60 years of neo-colonization, there is a sense in which we have found ourselves in a situation where we have no faith in ourselves. Our levels of esteem are such that we doubt ourselves so very much, and so very fundamentally that even the things that we ought to do, we don't do. And the COVID-19 has served to expose our underbelly, that when we found ourselves confronted with this pandemic, when we examined our hospitals, we found those hospitals wanting. The entire continent of Africa has fewer ICU beds than the country of Germany. When we found ourselves in terms of the hospital beds, we have fewer beds in the entire continent of Africa than there are beds in Spain. And when we found ourselves needing ambulances, we discovered that we have fewer ambulances than the entire country, than the country of Italy. When we found ourselves wanting for ventilators, we discovered that South Korea has more ventilators than all African countries combined. And when we were hungry for masks, we discovered that we didn't even make masks, and that Jack Ma from China had to give us masks. And it's only after that that we started discovering that we could very well make them. So that my kinsman, whom I've quoted so very often, Ali Mazrui, was very right and remains as right as he was in 1980s, that Africa produces what it does not consume and consumes what it does not produce. But we cannot afford the luxury of resting on our laurels. We cannot afford the luxury of engaging in perpetual lamentation. I think that we can now, in the midst of COVID, recognize that this is an opportunity that we can seize. And I hope that this time round, we will not be accused of never being in the business, never being out of the business of missing an opportunity to miss an opportunity.